Hi, Dr. Shook here. In this video, I want to talk about how a low thyroid promotes brain degeneration. A lot of people don't realize this, but the fact is, when you have a low thyroid, your mental fatigue and your brain fog and your just in general lack of energy is not just due to the lack of thyroid hormone itself. What they found is that whenever you have an autoimmune thyroid condition, your immune system sees the thyroid gland as a foreign substance, and it attacks the gland and destroys it periodically whenever the immune system is exacerbated or triggered. What we found is that people that have Hashimoto's, where they have antibodies against their thyroid itself, also in a lot of cases develop antibodies to their cerebellum. Now, cerebellum is, they call it the little brain, and it's in the back of the brain, the back of the head here. It has two lobes and looks like a smaller version of your cortex, or the larger part of the brain. All input from your body goes into the cerebellum. To keep this simple, goes to the cerebellum and is processed there first. It is responsible for balance and coordination. A lot of your it can affect vertigo and dizziness, your ability to walk. So what happens is, through this molecular mimicry, and remember I've talked about this in another video, but that's basically where a tissue, for example the cerebellum, is molecularly, so on the level of the molecule, the shape is similar to that of tissues of the thyroid or enzymes within the thyroid, and so similar that the immune system does not differentiate them and can't tell them apart. So what ends up happening is, if you develop antibodies to the thyroid, a lot of people with Hashimoto's, we found, will develop these antibodies to the cerebellum. Not good. What ends up happening here is that the autoimmune attack not only attacks the thyroid gland, it attacks the cerebellum, destroying brain tissue. This is not science fiction. This is absolute fact. And there's a few other things I want to mention, and I will at the end of this video, that are also cross-reacted through molecular mimicry, other targets. But what ends up happening is, as this progresses, people that have Hashimoto's, a lot of times, this just goes unnoticed. And what you'll see is that these people will develop, with Hashimoto's, will start to develop issues with some balance disorders or dizziness. They'll get cases of vertigo, and they'll think that it's just due to either blood sugar, or that they have neuritis, or there's something along those lines. This mechanism of cerebellar autoimmunity is almost never recognized. I mean, this is something that is new within the science, it's new within the literature, and what we do is we order a laboratory test through Cyrex Labs. It is a multiple tissue antibody test, and what we do is, we find out you're autoimmune, we order that test. And we get that test so that we can see if you have cerebellar antibodies, if you have GAD65 antibodies, which is an enzyme. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about at the end. But we want to see if you're getting other tissue destruction, because what we're going to do is, it's predictive. It's predictive of tissue death and damage, of future problems with that organ. So are we concerned about your cerebellum being destroyed through autoimmunity that goes unchecked? Absolutely, because what can happen is you develop, like I said, problems with balance, with dizziness. You can develop ataxia. Ataxia is where you can't even walk, and then you can develop a tremor. These are all things. Your cerebellum is vital. I mean, your entire brain's vital, but it's something that is, we cannot let it go unchecked. If we don't check that, then sometimes when we do this, we want to find out what else is there, because it explains a lot of other symptoms that someone's having, and it also lets us know, how urgent and dire the situation is. Because if you're having multiple tissue attacks, your cerebellum's going, you have GAD65 antibodies, you've got these antibodies to your transglutaminase in your intestinal tract. You've got antibodies to your thyroid. These are major issues. And the only way that you can address those is by figuring out the triggers, removing the things that are pushing this process along, support the immune system, help the person to heal so that you can put that autoimmunity in remission, because you cannot afford to lose brain tissue, thyroid tissue, gut. I mean, all these things are vitally important. So what ends up happening is that these people that have Hashimoto's or these thyroid disorders, their physician, it's just missed, and there's no support for the brain. And one of the ways that you can tell if this is something that could be happening to you is if you get absolute fatigue. You just get exhausted when you try to use your brain, for example, to read, but you do no physical activity, because what that does is that taxes the brain, and that taxes the ability, the metabolic capacity of the brain to work. And if you become exhausted from trying to use and just from mental activities, that's not a good sign. And so that's something that what we do is we look at the thyroid, but then we also assess the brain. And by assessing the brain, we, just like with it's this personalized approach to healthcare. I mean, it's what you have to have. We look at what's going on. We see if we can identify the mechanism. So is it a problem with your brain endurance, and it's a circulation issue where you're not getting enough oxygenation, you have hypoxia, not enough oxygenation to the brain. If that's the case, then we want to identify the mechanisms and see if we can increase circulation to the brain. If it's a blood-brain barrier issue, because you have a barrier called the blood-brain barrier, it keeps larger molecules and inflammatory molecules out of the brain tissue. If that barrier is compromised and you are letting inflammatory chemicals into the brain and you're activating the immune system of the brain, which are called microglial cells, these microglia, they're extremely protective of the brain, and they will destroy everything and create massive inflammation, and that can cause a lot of issues with the brain. That can cause issues with transneural degeneration, which is where the brain shrinks. There's so many problems there. And then we're going to look at things like, do you have serotonin and dopamine issues where you're not producing the normal brain neurotransmitters, and that can cause a number of problems from system function to brain function. So we want to assess the brain, and a lot of people, that is one of the things that kind of, they're taken aback, almost like, wow, my brain's affected by this? Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. The contemporary literature and science behind this all shows us that this is occurring and this is happening. So basically what we do is we just look to see what's there and we address it appropriately. And that's part of looking at the thyroid too. So a lot of times, if you've watched any of my other videos, one of the things that we have to do is we have to do a lot of testing. And we have to do the testing because if you have a problem, it has to be identified. We cannot customize or tailor a program to help you without this testing. And at this point, you can't afford to waste time. And that's really because time could be brain tissue, it could be thyroid tissue, and that could be quality of life. I mean, these are not things that we can take lightly. So we get the tests. We order a lot of tests through Cyrix Labs because they are the cutting edge. It's the only place we can get a lot of these antibody tests. It's the only place that will do the IgA and IgG antibodies combined, which is more sensitive. I mean, I digress. But anyway, I just wanted to cover this and talk about this topic. And do you know why you can have brain degeneration with thyroid, and especially Hashimoto's thyroiditis? I'm Dr. Shook. I hope you found this informative. And if you need anything, just let us know. If you have any questions, shoot us an email. I appreciate you taking time from your day to learn more about your health. And I look forward to sharing some more information with you in the future. Thanks.